You got heat? You're good? They filled your tank? That's crazy, isn't it? How excited were you? Morning. Morning. Going to call this meeting to order. Can we first stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance. Flag. Okay, thank you. We'll do the roll call. Michael Ham here. Lynn Archer. And Anion absent with notice. Steve Kelly is absent with notice. Rashida Tyler.
Here.
Rachel Silverman.
Here.
And Costu Walla is absent with we have a quorum. Mission statement of the idea. Foster creation and the retention of expansion of existing business. You'll have in front of you the minutes from our last meeting here. Can you take a moment? Accept the motion to accept the minutes from January 18th.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Public comment on agenda items only. No one online? Nobody? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Exempt session. Council? Council?
As we've discussed, Chair, there's a couple reasons to go into executive exempt session to get the advice of counsel on legal matters, and executive session to discuss several pending litigation matters, the Kingstonian appeal, the Ellen Bogdan small claims matter.
Thank you, Council. Thank you,
So we
Council.
need a motion.
Can we get a motion to go into exempt session? Second? Second? All in favor? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, okay. So can I have a motion from the board to come out of executive session?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
And no
Aye.
action was taken during exempt session. So we'll continue on here. The chair's report. So there's been a lot of movement since I came on as the chair. We have RFPs out for executive director, CFO, and accounting positions. Amber and Lisa are doing a tremendous job. I am in constant contact with Amber. Speak to Lisa. There's a lot of movement going on there. I've recently met with the county executive to discuss how the IDA plays a role in her vision for the county. I also speak with Kim Wiedemann on a weekly basis. We were touching base on that, on different things for economic development throughout the county. Joe and his team have been doing an excellent job representing all matters of business, which you hear in Joe's reports. We actually held our public hearing as a new board with Zinc 8 last week, and we're looking forward to all clients coming our way in the future. I'd like to say that this board here, speaking to everybody on the board, everybody on this board is doing an excellent job, and handling their duties that we ask them to do. It also like to touch base on the everybody. I applaud everybody for getting the compliance together for the site visit in a very short amount of time. Site visits were good. As Amber will talk about in her report. We still have some we would like to do yet. So anybody can get on board with Amber. Reach out to Amber and put their name in for the site visit. And that's my report. So actually, I'm wrong. I let back. I'm not finished. So everybody has in front of them. They provided with the following forms, which have to be completed and returned to Lisa. In your packet, you'll have a financial disclosure, code of acknowledgement of fiduciary duties, and we're going to be doing 2022 member evaluations. So everybody has that, right? Everybody has that, right? Okay. Okay. Now, no, we've done these yearly. So, yeah. Everything goes to Lisa. Us? That is something through ABO. Yeah.
Governance committee will review them, and then it will be posted. The compiled report will be posted on the site so that ABO has it.
Any other questions? Okay. That was my chair report. Okay. Moving on. Financials, accounting, and administrative update. Amber, you're on.
So I have before everybody the December 31st, 2022 financial statements. So I want to just kind of briefly go over these so that the load is a little bit lessened for the next finance committee meeting. At the next finance committee meeting, the audited financial statements will be reviewed. All of the ABO filing will be reviewed, gone over, and hopefully approved for the March 31st deadline. So starting with cash, so the net change in cash is $108,000 from 2021 to 2022. The CD with Rhinebeck Savings is going to be reported on the investment report with ABO, so you'll see that number on that report. Now this has changed a little bit since the last time it was presented to the board. Some adjustments to the chart of accounts like we discussed before. I separated out long-term accounts receivable from short-term accounts receivable so that you can see the distinguishment of what's actually the cash that you'll actually have in the upcoming year versus future years. And you kind of get a better sense of what's forthcoming and what's past due. So due to UC CRC account, you'll notice that matches on the CRC's financial statements. Let's go to the next page. Escrow has been completely separated out so that you can see each individual project's escrow balance. And that'll provide for better tracking. I do expect the accrued expenses to change. The attorney fees were paid through October 31st, so we'll add anything that's November 1st to December 31st onto here, and we'll adjust that before the audited financials are finalized. This is just a breakdown of the short-term and long-term accounts receivable on this next page. You'll see that the majority of these have been paid already this year, and there's only $1,000 that are past due from the beginning of 2022. Okay, so now on to the statement of activity. Not a lot to really discuss here. As far as changes go, you'll see that I've grouped the revenues and expenses together so that there's operating and non-operating. And then when you go to tick and tie to the audit report and to the ABO reports, everything should sum really nicely and neatly. So that'll provide for better understanding between the different reports that come before you. These reimbursements under expenditures, those are from the CRC. So that's part of the shared services agreement. And that's the 5% reimbursement for those included services there. I think that's about it. Largely, ABO wants to hear that the board is taking their mission into consideration, that they are operating under the terms of that mission, that they're evaluating their performance. So that's really like the theme of the other additional reports that are due. What are the performance measures? What did the board do to review those? And so a lot of what the board has done this year is taking the organizational structure very seriously and into consideration and discussing how to change that to better suit the mission and to better meet the goals and mission of the agency.
Great job. I mean, you're all over it. I hope Vicky's watching this. This is what. Okay. So committee reports. Audit. Steve is absent today with notice, so there's no report on audit. Loki Brill reports. Let me take a look here. Let's see what we have. What page is that? So Loki Brill, a totally monthly head count of 0 workers were reported. There were no compliance and exemption. There's 0 workers were non-compliant. There's no availability for monthly compliances. Romeo Enterprises, of the 239 workers that are at that site, they were all compliant with no exemptions. They have 100% compliance average. Afera, a total monthly headcount of 36 workers were reported. Of the 36, they were all compliant with no exemptions. So they have a 100% compliance average also. You'll notice on page 12, the local labor status report, it reflects the same thing that I just reported, okay? And it has a rundown of what contractors are currently working at those sites. And that's the Loki Brill report. Finance, Rachel.
No finance reports.
Okay, I have a note here, as per Amber. Okay, it says that we'll need to have a meeting of the Finance Committee before the next regular meeting to go over annual reports and the external auditor's report. Okay, so we'll make a note of that. Get that scheduled.
Like literally right before, like the beginning
Do you want to do that?
or a separate day.
You want to do it way earlier, so you're,
Okay, no problem.
okay. Governance. Diane is also out. She's out sick. I can tell you firsthand that there's not been a lot of movements in the governance right now. I did meet with Diane for breakfast the one morning. I shoveled off my notes to, I put them in triplicate, by the way. Okay, so Diane has all the notes in triplicate for you and Costube on housing. Yeah, I just found another pile down in my office, my regular work office. So I'll have those over to you also, to Diane, so you guys can move ahead with that. We'll move on to old business. So, status of pending projects. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. If you go to page 13, that's our pending transaction list. There's been no change with projects 1, 2, and 3. With respect to item 4, that's the Zinc 8 project, and the Chair will report during item 2 bullets down on the public hearing that was held last week. I'm sorry, it was held on January 31st, so it was more than last week. It was 2.5 weeks ago. And then if you look under status, at today's meeting, it's important for us to document that we've considered, we've listened to the chair and thought about any public comments that we've received at the public hearing, along with any written comments that we may have received, and the chair will report on whether we've received any written comments. And then the next action that is on schedule for this project, or will be scheduled for this project when we get the information, is consideration of the final approval for the project. This project is different than what we've done in the past. The last several meetings or last several projects that the IDA has done have been IDA straight lease projects, where we simply take title to the property, lease it back, and give them exemptions from mortgage recording tax, a pilot, and sales tax. This project involves the issuance of bonds by the IDA to assist them in the financing. We're not loaning them any of our money. What we're doing is facilitating a lending that they are going to do with a local bank or an investment banking firm. Before we can consider that bond resolution, we need to have a commitment letter or a term sheet from the lending institution so we know what the terms are, the principal amount, the interest rate, the amortization, loan covenants, etc. I know the company I've had several conversations with them. The chair has had several conversations with company staff. They're working on getting their financing together, and so could be as early as the next month, but we're really waiting on them for the next step. And once we have the bond terms, we can then consider the bond resolution and then move toward a closing. So that's what I have for the status of pending projects, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. So, pending enforcement matters?
Yes, nothing new on that other than Mr. Baker and I have been exchanging emails and phone calls about doing a clawback bill for the Golden Hill NH Realty matter. You'll recall that that's a project that the IDA administered, monitored, discovered that they weren't meeting their job numbers. We invited the company back in. The representation, frankly, was a little spotty, to say the least. We didn't get satisfactory answers with respect to their job levels, and so we moved forward and terminated that transaction and put them back on the tax rolls. So they were off the tax rolls for approximately a year. Under the documents, technically, we can send them a clawback bill for the 1 year that they had the benefit of the pilot agreement, and I've just been exchanging information with Mr. Baker, the city assessor, to determine what the actual amount should be. I hope to have that for the next meeting. And then also the chair has reminded me that we did take enforcement action on 2 prior projects, Greenhouse and Darien Lake, and I'm double checking our files on the status of those documents, and I'll have those for the IDA staff in the next week or two.
The payback on the year that they had to reduce tax, does that go back to the city?
Yeah.
And so it's a negotiation with the city that you're facilitating?
Right, exactly. And it's not only the city, Ms. Archer, but it's also the county and the school district. But you're right. I didn't want to, frankly, take an attempt to determine what the actual tax bill would be, and that's why I'm circling with the assessor. What I'm doing here and what we're doing is, just by way of background, because this is an unsecured obligation. So we're going to send the bill, we'll send a couple of follow-ups, but I'm not sure what the next step is going to be. But from our perspective, we've done that step. And that's the issue that I'm always concerned about with respect to IDA operations, is making sure that we're continuing to monitor and administer projects. We shouldn't just close on a transaction and put those papers on the shelf. And you'll see that when Amber reports back to you, for instance, on the Paris report. She's going to go through with you the many projects that you have in your inventory and what the job numbers were in terms of what they promised and what they actually have. And that's an important part of your responsibilities as board members to the IDA, that administration and monitoring. And that was fully demonstrated in the Golden Hill NH Realty matter.
So is there a concern that we will get the back tax for that year or not? Are you saying there's no obligation for them to?
Well, there's a contractual obligation.
Okay,
And the issue is, I'm not sure how they're going to react to the bill. We could sue them. And what we'll do is we'll come back and report to you about the next steps.
Got it.
I mean, what we may want to do is pass this on to the city, the school, or the county and let them, take the.
Because we would get nothing out of that, so
Exactly.
it really.
They
would
benefit
be-
the most from this.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the
Right.
lines of responsibility here.
These are all good questions. Technically, at the risk of getting into the weeds, the pilot agreement and the clawback agreement are agreements between the project applicant and us. But under New York State law and the IDA statute, the municipalities can sue under that pilot agreement. They've been given
Authority,
third-party
yeah.
status, if you will, under that contract. So my suggestion, at a minimum, on any of these things, is that when there's a problem like this, is that we send out a bill, and then we send a couple of nasty letters, and then we circle here and we circle with the affected taxing jurisdiction and make a decision about
How to
what we
proceed.
want to do.
Got it.
Obviously, if the amount was a large seven-figure amount or a high six-figure amount, that might be something where we want to incur expenses on our own to chase this. A one-year pilot bill is probably going to be, well, I'm not even going to speculate as to what the number is going to be, but it may not be advantageous for us from a cost-benefit standpoint in terms of incurring those fees to sue and try to get a judgment, that sort of thing. But again, these will be issues that will.
So their obligation to the IDA is a fee-related obligation, and dependent on the size of the fee, whether or not it's worth pursuing. Got it.
The pilot payment is not a fee, a pilot payment, right?
If a third party sues them, do we have to join the suit?
That's a good question. They may ask us to do that, but they don't need to.
Okay.
They don't need to.
Thank you.
Yep, you're very welcome. And that's all I have on pending enforcement, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Zinc 8. So the public hearing was held on January 31st, 2023. I spoke about this earlier. It was the first public hearing we've had since the new board has been assembled here. I want to thank Steve Kelly for coming out and making that meeting. Also, Joe and Shannon were there, and Jay and Lisa. Excuse me? Are we on the Zoom?
Okay, good.
And it was a good public hearing. Joe and myself, we ran it on a different format, what we're used to. We bounced things back and forth as we went along. Joe loves reading all the legal stuff, so I've let him run with that. That was great. I appreciate it, Joe. I thought it was a good job. We had two public speakers. One was Town Supervisor Quigley, who I'd like to thank not only the town of Ulster, but the supervisor, Jim Quigley, for hosting us out there. Jim had positive notes about the project. He asked that moving ahead, everybody respect that we're in the town of Ulster, which we all agreed, obviously, we would do. The other speaker was former board member Rick Jones, and he was positive and excited that renewables were coming to the area, and he's behind the project. To date, we have received no written comments, and the deadline was February 13th, which was Monday on Zinc 8. And to piggyback off of what Joe just mentioned, currently we're waiting for documents to come across to move ahead, with this project. So that's my report, unless you have anything else you want to add on Zinc 8?
Could I, ask
Sure.
a couple questions? I went over the notes, which I love the way these are written. I mean, if you're not there,
Hmm?
you get a sense of the back and forth and what everybody was talking about. So I was going back over Rick Jones' comments and Jim Quigley's comments, and I thought they brought up some interesting things that we probably should have a conversation about. And one of them is, even though this is a bond, and I believe in the past bonds did not have any type of clawback or contractual clawback for calling a note if they didn't meet the requirements, should we be having a conversation that even bonds should have a clawback if people are not fulfilling
So-
obligations around generating the number of jobs?
Your concern was the same as mine when it comes to bonding. I've dealt with some stuff before with other clients. And I reached out to Joe, and this was a while ago. And Joe has been working on language for a recapture on the bonds. Now, if you read the agreement with us in Zinc 8, you'll read that in the contract.
Okay.
They are subject to recapture. Right, Joe?
Absolutely, and you're right, Ms. Archer. The chair has raised this with me in the past because we did have a bond transaction in our portfolio that wasn't following what they had told us that they would be doing. The issue for your consideration, and what I'll do is I'll have something more formal for you at the next meeting, is the history and the background of clawback agreements relates to making sure that there's a quid pro quo with respect to the granting of benefits. And the big sensitivity with respect to the granting of benefits is exemption from real property taxes. So the clawback is intended to repay the affected taxing jurisdictions for that lost revenue, sales tax, mortgage recording tax, and real property tax. When you're handling a bond transaction, the benefit to the company is the mortgage recording tax, if there is a mortgage securing the bond. But the only other benefit to the company is the difference between a conventional rate and the taxable
And the
rate.
rate we're giving them,
Right. And the only party that is, quote, losing in that situation is the federal government and the state government, because it's lost tax revenue or the interest that the lender is receiving on the bond transaction. There's no local cost to the county, the school district, or to the city or town. So,
Does the ABO or state have a position on this as it relates to what they're losing in a transaction like
right,
that?
not to my knowledge, and what I'll
Okay.
do is I'll double check on that.
Yeah.
Because just stepping back and looking at it neutrally for a
Mhm.
second, forcing a redemption of the bonds because they haven't met their job numbers is a pretty significant remedy or impact. And what I was thinking in discussing this informally with the chair was maybe we come up with some number that reflects at least a portion of the benefits that they're getting from the differential, and we require them to pay that amount back, we require them to pay that amount to us as a penalty for failing to meet their job numbers. So they keep their financing together, and while we don't eliminate completely the benefit of the financing, we have, something stiff, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. I mean, we'll circle this internally in my office, and we'll also double check the ABO and the state to make sure there isn't anything like that.
And it would be great to understand this penalty that you're recommending versus if you do a clawback, what would be the implication of that? So we're looking at it from both sides, and I see that because the whole thing is structured around financing with the bank and in conjunction with the bank. And so I get the interconnections of that kind of financial agreement, but it's also ensuring that if you're getting an advantage, you're meeting your obligations.
Right, and that's all understandable, and I'm your counsel, so I'm more than sympathetic to that. I'm also somewhat concerned about what the impact of that requirement would be on the lender. And would the lender say, well, I'm not willing to take that risk and lend the money to, in this case, Zinc 8, if there's a possibility that the transaction could be collapsed by the failure to meet the job numbers. And recall that under our policy, our job number threshold is also fairly steep. There are some IDAs that, if a company comes in and promises 50 jobs, the recapture trigger is 80% of that number. If you fall below 80% of that, in this case 50. And we use a 90% factor. So we give the company only a 10% cushion, if you will.
Is that because our UTEP puts so much weight on the jobs?
Well, I think that's part of it, and it's also
in comparison to maybe some of the other.
And I think it's also a determination by the board that we want, if they tell us 50 jobs, we want to hold them to that, and we'll give them 10%, because we recognize that things change, but 20% is too much.
Right.
So let me come back to you for the March meeting, and we'll discuss this in more detail. I mean, but it is an issue that the chair has made clear to me that is of concern to him, and it stems in part from exactly what I was telling you before, namely something that happened in the past, and the IDA was doing a good job of monitoring and administering a prior project.
Okay, I have a question, just to make sure I understand. So the concern you raised, which I understand about a financial institution perhaps not wanting to support a project that could be undone, is the idea that the penalty would be an alternative way to incentivize them to meet their numbers without putting this risk on their financing as a whole.
Right. It would be a separate provision. Absolutely.
I got it.
So
I got it.
and I mean, you could, just looking out the window and doing the math for a second. If you're borrowing $10 million over a 20-year period at 5%, and you run that debt service schedule at 3%, right? So you come up with the two numbers. That's going to be a big number.
Right.
That might be too much of a penalty, right? But, you put something in there that keeps, that people would pay attention to, something like 100,000, 200,000, $250,000, that's a big number. That's a big penalty, $50,000. So but we'll run those numbers for you and let you look at it.
So I do have a question, and it's more of just like finding other examples of IDAs or others that do have these clawback provisions within their bonds, because it's a $150,000, $250,000 is a large penalty relative to the size of the company or relative to the income that they have. So if the company makes 10 times that, it may be worth it. So I think I'd like to see some examples of other IDAs that maybe have these clawback provisions, or if they don't, the reasons why, so we can see what others are doing.
Right. and that's an absolutely reasonable course also that I can follow up on. Again, for your background, when I first started in this area back in the early mid '80s, the number of tax-exempt bond deals that we used to do on an annual basis was significant, because there was a lot of upstate manufacturing and a lot of upstate commercial projects that took advantage of tax-exempt bond financings. I probably do one of these deals, like the zinc deal, every 5 years now, because there's just not a lot of upstate manufacturing that takes advantage of this bond program. Most of the bond financings that we do are either low-income housing, or which have no jobs or very little jobs, or not-for-profits, YMCA's, colleges, hospitals, and there's no local benefit. There's no local cost, if you will, under the college transaction. There's no significant local cost. There's a mortgage reporting tax, but there's no real property tax, and there's no sales tax because they're already exempt. So most of the IDAs that we work with do not have a clawback provision for bond transactions, because the focus of the clawback provisions has been, frankly, in response to, in some cases, legislative initiatives where they say, look, the local community is giving up real property tax revenue. The company better adhere to their job numbers, right? So, but here, like I said, we don't have a pilot agreement. This would be an easier case if they were doing a building and we had a pilot agreement along with that, and that way we could segment it. We could say, we could put them back on the tax rolls, but leave their bond financing alone. See, so it's kind of an interesting question, and I'll be back to you for our meeting in March with alternatives.
I have we've explored this for a long time. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I was apprehensive on the bonds because I always wanted to know what the recapture tool was on it. And Joe, we've got this now. Reaching out to other IDAs, which we've explored, nothing. I do believe this board is the first board to really use the recapture tool
For a bond deal, yeah, it was pretty. We forced a company to refinance. It was.
That's correct, and this is where it began.
It was very unusual.
It was where it began, and to an attestament to them, they were actually great this year, and getting all the information over to Amber. But
I think it's so important though, and I think as new board members, understanding some of these things that came out of here,
Mm-hmm.
out of the
Absolutely.
meeting is helpful for us to discuss, so we have a general idea of how things work, how they operate, what we can improve upon. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is generate jobs. And at the end of the day, we're also trying to entice people to come to their community to create those jobs. And as long as there is a good partnership with those companies and everybody's living up to those expectations, all is well. But when there isn't one, you always have to prepare for the one-off. Unfortunately, that may not live up to the expectations or overcommits because it is advantageous to their numbers. And I think that's, we as new board members, this is a good discussion. I find it helpful.
and I believe as iPark moves ahead, depending on what the success of Zinc 8 is, and moving ahead, this may be pretty much the normal, okay? Because the pilots, they don't own the property.
Now, one of the other comments that came up was with regards to following through on part of, I guess, the UTEP that revolves around construction jobs performed by people that are part of the region.
Rick touched base on that. Rick Jones touched, and I didn't understand that because currently we.
Loki Brill does that, right?
Loki Brill already handles that. Okay.
Okay.
I think what Rick was saying was he basically wanted to make sure it went to. Well, yeah, he was. Loki Brill already handles that. There's the answer. Okay.
All right.
There you go.
And then I wasn't quite. Was there a confusion around Kingston and Ulster County that Quigley brought up? wanting to remind us that we were in Ulster County. I guess I didn't
No,
get that.
what he did though, he did touch base on saying, he just wanted to remind us out here in the town of Ulster that, just treat it with respect and how we move ahead with projects.
Oh, okay.
And we were like, okay, we absolutely.
Okay.
So,
there was nothing that
No.
happened that we should be aware of or sensitive to
No.
going forward?
no, it was good. Supervisor Quigley spoke positive about the project.
Okay.
And, Rick Jones also spoke positive about the project. And like I said, we've got no written comment, nothing.
And what was the comment about additional fees and using them in the community? I wasn't clear on that.
Sorry,
You remember
I think
that?
I don't remember
I
that.
think it was mentioned by Jones and
Oh.
then reinforced by
Right.
Supervisor Quigley. Of course, what town doesn't want extra money?
Well, exactly, but it's
So
hard
I get
to.
that.
Yeah, I think maybe, I would say, the reinvestment of money into town of Ulster is going to come from the additional jobs that are going to be created off Zinc 8, and companies like Zinc 8 out there. That's what I would say. Joe, anything else? Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Chair.
go ahead.
Yeah, at the risk of being rude, I did check my cell phone here because it was ringing while I was talking. I did get a call from Mr. Parker, and he advised me that the financing piece will be set in time for the March IDA meeting. So we expect to have the commitment letter for the $10 million of bonds in the next couple of weeks, so that we'll be in a position to do the final bond resolution.
Good.
At the March meeting, which is very good news.
Good. Okay, so, organizational structure. How about you, Amber? You want to just report on what we got out for RFPs, what we've received?
So at the last regular meeting, the board extended the RFPs for the information services and audiovisual services, and then the accounting services. So we reached out to a large number of firms for all of these services, attempting to collect proposals, providing the RFPs, and just saying, hey, heads up, this is out there. Are you interested? Just, creating that additional outreach. There was one response to the audiovisual and technological services. So this is a proposal that covers both of those services in one, and that is included in the packet. For the accounting services, there was also one proposal received, but we have notification that another is interested. So that one we didn't include in the packet today. Just for the intent having been reached out to.
The accounting services you're speaking of, is that CFO accounting, or is that just the accountant?
So that terminology came from a respondent.
Okay,
Their services, they title CFO for hire.
okay.
So that came out of that particular firm and what they title those services and that acting role.
Okay. And executive director.
The executive director job description and employment opportunity is posted on the IDA's website. Lisa has been very hard at work to create a LinkedIn account, getting that up and running, figuring out the logistics of how to do that, how it ties into individual accounts, or how it can be standalone if that's possible. So she's been working very hard with LinkedIn, which goes alongside in the Jeanette goals of creating that presence. So that is actually quite a big undertaking ultimately. But the job, we've received one resume and cover letter for that specific job, and it is posted publicly, but we haven't done much more outreach for that in particular at this point.
So currently with the IT service, AV services, I've spoke to council to draw up a contract for hire for them. As we know, and checking with Jay and Lisa, they're, our website is, it needs attention. Currently, Amber spoke with Joe. Do you want to speak on how you felt about Joe and technology services?
So, in speaking with Joe from Technology Services, he was very familiar with IDAs, has worked with a number of IDAs locally, was very familiar with the state requirements for email and website and insurances, spoke to some recommendations regarding the agency's purchase of a laptop, how to secure that, how to back it up, was, from my perspective, very knowledgeable. I was impressed in talking to him. He seemed familiar, to say the least.
So on that note, I would recommend that we move ahead and we hire technology services as our IT, AV people. We could take that to we need a motion and a voice vote, right, Joe? Yeah, motion.
I'll make the motion. I reviewed the whole thing. I thought it was extremely thorough. And I know the criticality around our website and getting it up to snuff. So I wholeheartedly support
Second.
engaging the firm.
A second.
All in favor? Aye. And we should record it for a voice vote, right, Joe? Or would that would do it? Okay. All right, great.
So what I'll do, I'll reach out. Actually, do you want to reach out to him, or do you want me to reach out to him? I'll say that, that he's been appointed or he's been selected, and he may have a form contract,
Yeah.
and I'll update that,
I
or
know.
I'll just use the contract that I've
Yeah.
already started. So,
Great. Yeah,
I'll
please,
do it,
Joe.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Take one off the board. Okay, as they come in, Great job, everybody. New business? Is there any new business? Motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. To call to order the meeting for the UCCRC, February 15th, 2023. It's 10:30, just like the paper says. Okay. The mission statement. The mission statement of Ulster County Capital Resource Corporation is to promote community and economic development in Ulster County in ways that complement the work of Ulster County, primarily through issuing and selling bonds for nonprofit institutions. Before you'll see the minutes from the previous meeting on January 18th. Could you please review, and I'll accept the motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes.
Motion?
It.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Public comment on agenda items only. Anyone? Okay, Chair's report. Please let my report for the UCIDA reflect my report for the UCCRC. Financials, accounting, and administrative update.
So again, I wanted to take the opportunity today to go over the financial statements for December 31st, 2022, and the year ended, just to really lessen the burden of what needs to be discussed during the Finance Committee meeting in preparation of the March 31st required filing deadline. The CRC's reports are in very, very, very good shape. Both projects have been very responsive. The reports are mostly done. Just like really one outstanding issue left to go before they can be finalized. So I'm very, very happy with where these statements are currently. I do expect to have one small adjustment, and that would be accounting for 5% of the attorney's fees through November 1st to December 31st that the IDA will pay. So going through the balance sheet or the statement of net position, the Rhinebeck Savings CD, again, that number will appear on the corporation's investment report. Only a small decline in cash, $34,800 roughly. That is largely due to the grant expenditures that took place. So the grant expenditures, as you're all aware, were $110,000, which created a net operating loss for the year. So the accounts receivable that you'll see here, that is to replenish the escrow account for Romeo Enterprises. The escrow, again, broken out into the title of the project, and then moving on to the activities. Project closing fees, those are closing costs for the Romeo Enterprise project, which took place during the year. The miscellaneous fees is actually a small prior period adjustment. Let's see. And then ultimately the next thing to report on is just the net change in your position for the end of the year being negative $58,000. Any questions?
That's 70,000, and of course that was just Romeo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the only project we have, right? That's yours. Thank you.
With Amber on amending the bylaws of the CRC. You'll recall that as part of Amber's review of the IDA's operations and the change in the staffing of the IDA, we made some technical adjustments to the bylaws, changing some staffing names and updating some, cleaning up some old references to meeting times. We're doing the same thing with Amber's help on the CRC bylaws. The CRC, because it's a different entity legally, the process is a little bit more involved. I've been coordinating with Amber on that. We've sent out the notice as required to the chair of the county legislature and requesting their consent to the modification of the bylaws. And then we'll and you've received the changes. Again, they're very technical, so you have them in advance of the 30 days required under the bylaws. So this will be technically in front of you all at the March meeting.
Aye.